Assalamualaikum everyone. Today we will have our virtual lecture on Topic 1, Macroeconomic Overview. I do hope you will use these slides together with your lecture notes and your required textbook. So if you have any inquiries or if you're unclear of any concepts, please ask me in class when you see me later. So what is economics? The definition of economics comes in many versions, depending on the books you buy or the authors you read. Here, I'm sharing with you several popular definitions of economics. Now, although you can see that the wordings may be different from one another, the overall message is the same, which is economics is basically a study of scarcity and choice. Let's begin our discussion on the first term, scarcity. So what is scarcity? Scarcity is a condition where human wants are always greater than the available resources to produce goods and services to meet those wants. As you can see here, resources are scarce or limited, whereas our wants are unlimited. Resources are also known as inputs or factors of production, and they are used to produce goods and services. There are generally four types of resources: land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship. Let's look at them one by one. Land are natural resources or gifts of nature. Examples include water, oil, forests, and coal. Now these natural resources may either be renewable or non-renewable in nature. The second resource, labor, are basically human resources, or the mental and physical capacity of workers to produce goods and services. The quality of labor depends on many factors, such as their skills, education levels, and motivation. The third resource is capital, which is manufactured resources, or physical assets used to produce other goods and services. Examples include factories, machineries, and plants. The fourth resource is entrepreneurship. Now this refers to someone who is willing to take the risks and brings the other three inputs together in order to produce innovative products in order to make profits. So as you can see, these resources are very hard to obtain, therefore it is quite scarce. Now let's move on to wants. As you may know, our wants are unlimited, and it's due to various factors. But here we shall focus on two of these factors, which are rational behavior and utility and profit maximization. What is rational behavior? Rational means a person or an individual knows what's best for them. Therefore, they will pursue what is in their best interest, including buying goods and services. In terms of utility, utility is another name for satisfaction. So consumers will always try to buy goods and services that maximizes their own satisfaction. Likewise, producers, they will always aim to try to maximize their profits. So as you can see here, consumers and producers have similar goals. One is to maximize their satisfaction or utility, and the other aims to maximize their profits. Now let's put them together. If an individual knows what's best for them, that is, if they are rational, they would buy goods and services that will meet their best interests. In other words, they will buy goods and services that will maximize their satisfaction or profits. Now, if you put these two concepts together, our wants are unlimited. In other words, we will always keep on buying things, demanding things, but the resources used to make the goods and services for our wants are limited. So given that these two concepts are in contrast of one another, therefore we have the scarcity condition. Now when scarcity happens, people are forced to make choices. Choices about what? Choices among alternatives or available alternatives. Now there's so many choices that we have to make, but we will focus on these two, which are choices at the individual level or micro level. And in our case, we are also going to focus on the choices made on the economy-wide level or the macro choices. With choices, trade-offs exist. Trade-offs are basically, what it means is we need to sacrifice something in order to get a certain product or goods and services or experience. In other words, when there's trade-off, there exists opportunity cost. What is opportunity cost? It's basically the value of the best alternative forgone or sacrificed in order to obtain a specific good. In other words, when we made a choice to buy product A, products B, C, D, and others are all forgone. In other words, those are the what you could have had instead of the choices that you selected. Now that we have learned about scarcity, choice, and opportunity cost, we can now try to visualize these concepts in an economic model. An economic model provides a powerful insight about the real world. It simplifies matters so that it can help us understand realities. One of the most popular economic models is the production possibilities model. This PPM represents the three concepts that we've learned earlier, that is scarcity, choice, and opportunity cost, in a diagram. Now, the diagram or graph used in the production possibilities model is called the production possibilities curve, PPC. Here's its definition. The PPC shows the maximum combinations of two outputs that can be produced in an economy at any given moment, given the available resources and technology. Now, as with other economic models, we have assumptions. If you noticed, most of the assumptions are already stated in the definition of the PPC. Number one, we assume that the economy is efficient. What it means is the economy is operating in full employment and at full production capacity. Full employment simply means all resources are being used, whereas full production capacity means production at that economy is at its optimal level using the most efficient resources or technologies. Now, the second assumption is mentioned in the definition. We assume that resources are fixed. Likewise, we also assume technology is fixed. We also assume there are only two goods involved, and finally, we assume that the economy has no international trade happening. Now, to recap, the PPC illustrates the basic economic concepts of scarcity, choices, and opportunity cost. Here is an example of a production possibilities model. Let's say we have a country, and this country produces only two products, bread and oven. As you can see here, these are the production possibilities of the two products. Now let's say you plot this table and you come up with this diagram. Now look at this line, the line that connects A, B, C, D, and E. This is called the production possibilities curve. Now as you can see, the PPC divides these two areas, which are the attainable area and the unattainable area. Attainable area simply means these are all of the products that the economy can produce or are able to produce, whereas anything outside this PPC line, the economy cannot produce. That is why sometimes the production possibilities curve is also known as the production possibilities frontier, because it limits the production at points on or below the PPC. Okay, so now let's recap. The line that connects points A to E is called the PPC, where this line separates the attainable area from the unattainable area. Attainable simply means this is the combination of goods that the economy can produce, whereas unattainable means the economy cannot produce them. Now, any points on the PPC is called the efficient points. It's called efficient because at any point, whether it's A, B, C, D, or E, the economy is at its full employment and at full production capacity level. Therefore, it is very efficient. Now, these points A, B, C, D, E shows the concept of choices, because what it means is the economy has a choice to either produce at point A or point B or point C or point D or point E. Now, whichever that the economy chooses, it's fine because they're all efficient. Now, any point inside the PPC is attainable, but it is not optimal. Imagine this point U here. Why would you be producing at point U where else you can produce on the PPC? Can you see what I mean? Because if you're at this point U, you're only producing this unit. and this unit. Whereas if you're at the point on the PPC, you'll be producing more of both goods. Okay, let me erase this so it doesn't look too crowded and messy. Okay, now any point outside the PPC shows the concept of scarcity, because as you can see, guys, since the resources are not yet in existence or scarce, this economy is unable to produce anything outside the PPC here. Okay, so let's recap. Any points on the PPC is attainable and optimal and efficient, and it reflects the choices that the economy can make. Any points inside the PPC shows it's attainable but not optimal, therefore it shows unemployment of resources. Any points outside the PPC shows unattainable combination of of goods and services, and therefore it shows the concept of scarcity. Okay, so in the previous slides, you have seen how the PPC illustrates the concepts of choices and scarcity. How about the concept of opportunity cost? Well, the PPC can also show that. How? From the movements from one point to another. Now, if you move from point A to B, for instance, what happens is that we are producing one more unit of bread. However, that would mean we have to forego or sacrifice 1 unit of oven. Now, if we move from point B to C, again, we are going to produce 1 more unit of bread. But this time around, we need to sacrifice 2 units of oven. How about from point C to D? Again, we are producing 1 more unit of bread. But this time, we are foregoing, yes, 3 units of oven. And finally, if you are moving from point D to E, although we are producing 1 more unit of bread, we need to sacrifice 4 units of oven this time. Now, what is the implication of this? This basically shows the shape, or why is the shape of our PPC concave and not a straight line? As you can see here, what we have shown you just now is basically the slope. Okay, what is the slope? Remember, slope, or M in math, is the change in y over change in x. Y here refers to our vertical axis or the oven axis, whereas x here refers to our horizontal or bread axis. Any changes in y over changes in x will give us the slope m. So basically, in math, it's called slope, but in economics, it's called opportunity cost. So all the numbers that we've calculated just now, 1, 2, 3, and 4, these are basically the slope coefficients. In other words, as we move along or as we move down the PPC, our slope gets bigger and bigger. Remember, slope is opportunity cost. Going bigger and bigger means increasing. So in other words, we follow the law of increasing opportunity cost or increasing slope. What it means is, as we want to produce 1 more unit of something, we need to forgo more and more of the other unit. So again, this is actually the explanation as to why our PPC is shaped like this, concaved, and not a straight line. If it's a straight line, therefore we will have a linear PPC, which is not the case in reality. Now you may be wondering, why is this so? Why is our PPC concave? The reason being, resources are not completely adaptable to alternative uses. What it means is, the workers who produce oven, they're not familiar in producing bread. So if we want to produce more and more bread, we cannot expect the similar or same number of workers from oven to make bread. In fact, we may need to use more and more resources from oven to make the bread because they just don't have the skill or experience. We need to train them. So that is the main reason, or the intuitive reasoning as to why the opportunity cost is increasing for the PPC. Now let's ask ourselves, can the PPC shift over time? The answer is yes. the PPC can shift. When the PPC shifts outwards, it's called having economic growth. What it means is, it is the ability of the economy to produce greater levels of output, which is represented by an outward shift of its PPC. Now, what are the factors that influence this outward shift or economic growth? There are several factors. Here I shall share with you 4. Increases in resources, technological advances, international trade, and population. Let's look at this in turn. Now remember our assumption earlier? We assumed that resources are fixed. In fact, we also assumed technology are fixed. But imagine if these two can be increased. If these two increase, therefore we will have more resources to produce more goods and services, isn't it? So that is one of the reasons why we can have economic growth. Likewise, population. Population is the base for labor force. So the more population a country has, the more potential workforce the country has as well. So that would mean they're able to produce more goods and services. And finally, from our assumption, we also assume that the countries do not have international trade. What if the countries can trade with other countries? Therefore, they're able to have more goods and services, even though not produced by their own people. So all of these are basically the reasons or the factors that will influence economic growth for a particular country. Now, in your lecture notes, I have included materials on economic systems. So I would appreciate it if you go and read the economic systems on your own. The main reason why I'm not covering it here is because this topic is already covered in Principles of Microeconomics. So for those of you who have already taken Econ 1510, you may see that the notes are similar to the ones that you've learned last semester. However, if you have not yet taken Principles of Microeconomics, it's all right. You can still read it on your own because these topics are normally not asked in the exams. We have come to the last part of our first topic, which is Introduction to Macroeconomics. Now, macroeconomics is very different from microeconomics. Micro is basically a study on individual economic units, such as households, firms, industries, and the government. Whereas macroeconomics is when we study the behavior of the economy as a whole. What it means is we are primarily concerned with economic growth in the long run, as well as fluctuations in output and unemployment in the short run. So basically, when we talk about macroeconomics, our concerns are mainly on topics such as the GDP, or the unemployment level, or inflation level, or balance of payment between Malaysia and the rest of the world. So all of these topics are basically the macroeconomic topics, or the economy as a whole. So you may be wondering, why do we need to learn macro separate from micro? Why aren't they the same thing? Well, macro is not the same as micro because aggregates, or the sum, is not merely additions or averaging of individual parts. It's more complicated than that, which you will be seeing as we go throughout the semester. Okay, so maybe the next thing you should know is, why do we want to study macroeconomics? There are plenty of reasons. Here I would like to highlight 2. One is we want to understand the events that occur in our daily lives. For instance, don't you want to know what are the causes of the Asian financial crisis back in 1997? Or don't you want to know what was the reason behind the financial crisis in 2009 to 2012? We may also want to be abreast with the current issues such as the high property prices, or why are our fuel prices always fluctuating, those things. Another reason as to why we should learn macroeconomics is so that we have a feel of what's going on in the economy. When we know what's going on, it'll give us a better idea on how things work and what are the factors that drive our economy or business. In fact, it's also some good icebreakers in interviews. Basically, when we study macroeconomics, we can be an informed citizen. We'll be able to know key economic indicators. We can learn how the economy functions overall. We may also be well versed in how economic policies work, and we may know the difference between monetary and fiscal policy, etc. Okay? So here, let's move on to the main macroeconomic goals. Generally, there are 5 macroeconomic goals. One is economic growth, followed by full employment, price stability, equitable distribution of income, as well as balance of payment. Now, the thing with these macroeconomic goals is it is not possible for an economy to meet all of them at the same time. Remember, our first point, or one of the first points we learned just now, was scarcity. Given the fact that resources are scarce or limited, it is not possible for the economy or for the government to achieve all of these goals at the same time. Remember, with scarcity, we have to make a choice. So yes, the government must make choice on whether they want to achieve full employment or economic growth or price stability or equitable distribution of income or balance of payment. Okay, so if you look at your lecture notes, you can see that I've given you several examples. Macroeconomic goals can be conflicting when, if the economy or if the government wants to achieve full employment, it might be at the expense of higher prices. If the economy wants to achieve economic growth, for instance, it's also at the expense of higher prices. Okay, so this is what it means. I hope you can try to relate the concept of scarcity and choice with now our macro goals or macro choices. Okay, moving on. The government plays an important role in realizing. So in other words, if you want to ask, how do we achieve these macroeconomic goals? It is through government policies. Now, the government manages the economy by implementing three general kinds of government policies, which are fiscal policy, monetary policy, and supply side policies. Now, fiscal policy and monetary policy, they are both known as demand side policy. Okay, so these two are the ones that we will be learning throughout the semester. Supply side policy is not within our syllabus, but I have included them in my lecture notes, so feel free to learn them on your own. Before we end, let's recall some of the important concepts that you have learned in this lecture. Scarcity, choice, opportunity cost, production possibilities model, efficient, which includes being fully employed and fully productive, macroeconomics. Now the last three, which are capitalism, socialism, and Islamic economic systems, this can be found in the economic system materials. Please be sure that you understand each and every one of these concepts, okay? So that's it. This is the end of our first virtual lecture. If you have any questions, feel free to email me at my email address there, or you can always ask any questions in our Google Classroom. If you're around campus and you feel like dropping by to get your lecture notes, please do email me first, because I don't want you to come all the way and be disappointed if I'm not in the room. Okay, till our next virtual lecture, please do take care of yourselves and see you then.